in his 40s.
So good evening and welcome everybody to the City of Lake Forest Park City Council special meeting for Thursday, June 5th. And I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'd entertain a motion for adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. It passes unanimously. Thank you, council. Tonight we have items for discussion, consideration, or action. It's a special night for us. As I indicated last night, it's a little bittersweet for us. Filling a vacant seat after the loss of a dear colleague. However, it is a celebration of our democratic rights, and we thank you all for being willing to volunteer and serve your community, no matter what happens, and whatever choice the council may make. We really sincerely hope that you all stay engaged with the community and continue to find ways to help the greater good, if you will. So I know all of you have had vast experiences in different areas, and we really thank you for bringing that to the table for us tonight. So tonight we're going to be going through an order. We're going to have Ashton first and Fiaz next, and then Richard. And we're, again, the format just for the edification of people out online or watch this later. Candidates will give an introduction that is limited to 5 minutes. The city council will ask predetermined sets of questions. Maximum time or time is somewhere between 14 and 21 minutes for that period of time. Last night, we didn't exceed even close to that time period. And then the council will go around the horn and ask follow-up questions pertaining to topics that the council and questions the council had previously asked. So, and that will be 4 to 11 minutes or so for per candidate. Just to let the community know, we will be taking public comments this evening after the interviews are completed. The council and the administration believe it's an essential part of the process to get input from the community after all 6 candidates, 3 last night and 3 tonight, have had the opportunity to speak and share their credentials and their stories with us. And then after that, we will be going into an executive session per the RCWs. The RCWs stipulate we can only, or the council can only discuss the qualifications of the candidate, not compare or contrast. So there are very strict guidelines that excuse me, I'm looking over here looking for Phil, that Attorney Pratt will keep us within. So, and she did last night. Thank you very much, Kim. And then after that time frame, we'll be coming back out, and there's a possibility the council may be taking action on the selection of a candidate to temporarily fill the vacancy of position 2. So just so everybody knows sort of the lay of the land. And as this is a special meeting, there will be no additional items added or changed on the agenda. Colleagues, any questions? Okay, let's get started. So we're going to start with Ashton McCartney. Welcome, Ashton. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi.
And I think there was a brief description of how the dais works there, the podium works, and then your microphone is already on, indicated by the red light. So you have the floor whenever you're ready.
Ready to roll. Okay. Hi, all. Thank you for this time today. As mentioned, my name is Ashton Alvarez McCartney. The things that I've done for the city, you can certainly see via my application. But more importantly, what you can't see and what I can't fit in 300 words or less in that application is what the city of Lake Forest Park has done for me, and the pivotal role that it's played in my life in so many integral stages. Growing up, I had 3 built-in best friends down the street from me. The safety of Lake Forest Park allowed me to grow up in an environment where we could have freedom to cultivate, where we could grow, where we could learn. Over 40 years ago, my parents had built their forever home, which is my childhood home where I grew up. Early on, I knew that I wanted to continue that legacy here in Lake Forest Park. For many of us, owning a home is a very lofty goal, and especially in this area. And that was my specific goal growing up. Being a young adult and living in Lake Forest Park, creating a home for myself and for my future family, it was something that gave me the drive to finish college 2 years early. It allowed me to, it forced me to work multiple jobs to try and save for this goal. And then it pushed me to be diligent with budgeting and fiscal responsibility. During the height of COVID, with the shutdowns everywhere, I was 9 months pregnant with the that little guy back there. And I had an 11-month-old, which is the girl back there. And specifically in Horizon View Park, where I live, it gave me a retreat during COVID times. I walked every day, sometimes 1, 2, 3 times a day, and it gave me a chance to connect with my community at a time that so many people were isolated. Today, living at Horizon View Park, my children are growing up, being able to run to the park after being left, after coming off the bus from Lake Forest Park Elementary. And as a family together, we stuffed over 3,000 eggs for a no-cost egg hunt for our community at the Horizon View Park. And then my kids are so excited for the upcoming Christmas holiday because we put out a North Pole post where we are answering back kids who wrote us letters. We got a handful last year, and it was a really great way for this community to come together, no cost, just build together camaraderie. Living in Lake Forest Park represents a fortitude that my grandparents had when they moved here in 1971. The strong work ethic and dedication that my parents had to raise my brother and I here in Horizon View, and then the commitment that my husband and I have to serve and preserve our community for all the children of Lake Forest Park and future generations. We, my family and I, we have our fingerprints in many different areas of this city. I am most recent past vice chair and chair of the Planning Commission, am currently still a commissioner. My husband owns a business here in LFP, and I'm a proud spouse of a Rotarian. I have been a homeowner in Lake Forest Park for over a decade, and I successfully built a brand new home in Lake Forest Park as well, abiding by all the permits and the boundaries and all of the steps that you have to do to take that successfully. The city has played such a vital and consistent role in my life, and I would absolutely love the opportunity to serve in this capacity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashton. Colleagues, let's dive right in here. Councilmember Leba, would you like to lead us off?
Thank you, Ms. McCartney. I think I'll give you the longest question this evening. Lake Forest Park is currently experiencing fiscal challenges with general fund expenditures exceeding revenues. In the 2025-2026 biennium, the City Council utilized approximately $800,000 from its nearly $7.3 million in unallocated fund balance. This excluded reserves designated for emergencies. While the city has taken steps to reduce expenses, it has worked to preserve essential public services. Looking ahead, a projected budget shortfall of approximately $1.6 million is anticipated for the 27-28 biennium. How would you propose addressing this projected imbalance? And please be specific in describing your approach.
This wasn't a multiple choice question. All jokes aside, the projected 1.6 budget is without a doubt a challenge, no question, but I don't think it's insurmountable. Addressing this imbalance is going to require a combination of strategic cost management, obviously, and that's something that this council has done diligently, and you've worked on for many months. I think there's an underscore under revenue enhancement, and then a long-term financial sustainability, so we don't have this heavy burden every biennium. There isn't a silver bullet, as you all very well know, but I think one key area to focus on in Lake Forest Park is the ability to increase revenue generation. One of the viable paths down revenue generation is through our zoning capabilities. Lake Forest Park has a very limited commercial zoning footprint. So by strategically adding or adjusting commercial zones, I think we can create new opportunities for economic growth, attract new businesses, and ultimately generate some more property taxes, tax revenue, and other sources of income, by way of business licensing fees and sales tax. One thing I really love about Lake Forest Park is how the residents truly get behind local businesses. And a recent example of that comes to mind with Skog House. Many of you know that and are smiling because you've probably waited in that super long line that's there every single day. Now, I know that they were actively looking for a commercial site and they couldn't find something in Lake Forest Park. And so now they have secured a location, but it's in that Lake Terrace. And so LFP lost that opportunity to generate some additional revenue from a service-based business that totally caters to our population. So I think that that is one specific area in which we can grow. Continuing down the line on zoning capabilities with middle housing requirements that we're facing as a city and affordability needs that are required to be met. By adjusting the zoning laws strategically, the city can support the construction of more housing options that are both affordable and sustainable while boosting revenue through taxes, fees, and other economic activity. I want to be really, really clear and careful with this idea because it has to be used strategically, as many of you very well know. This has been something that has been very loudly voiced recently within the Planning Commission. And our community has an overwhelming response that we want to maintain as much of what makes LFP, LFP. And so I'm very much in favor of that. But this is an area where maybe we could get surgical and not only meet our middle housing needs, but also find something that complements and supports sustainable growth for the future.
Thank you. Let's move on to, let's see. Next question. Question number 2. We're gonna go that was you, Tracy. Deputy Mayor.
Hi, this is McCartney. Thanks for being with us tonight. Second question is, Lake Forest Park is what they call built out, meaning there are not a lot of places to build new housing. What ideas do you have to increase the amount of affordable housing in Lake Forest Park?
Thank you. As mentioned in the application, and as we all know, we're facing a lot of challenges here. I think budget deficit, of course, is number one, middle housing needs being. So, but budget deficit, fiscal sustainability, an emphasis on revenue generation, as I just talked about, and then heavily reliance on communication and education rollout strategy for our residents. I don't think making major budget cuts in the area that residents have voiced and that they have voiced that they hold most dearly is going to be a long-term strategic maneuver. It would be a Band-Aid. Around the deficit, I would approach this conversation very broadly and very frequently. I place a lot of volume, emphasis, and attention around the communication and education rollout to all of our residents. A lot of this, the council has already begun. You've done a great job with that and the enactment, and I would really lean into this element of the budget deficit. For middle housing, with the recent work that we've had on the comp plan, the public has made it very clear to the Planning Commission that there is a desire and a need for diversity in the types of housing that we offer. Lake Forest Park has a market for people who wish to remain in LFP, but really do need to downsize. I know that that's not a surprise to anyone here in this room. The Planning Commission looked at and did a deep dive into ADUs well ahead of the middle housing unit requirement. And so I commend the commission on the work that they did with the resident engagement and ultimately recommending some changes to allow for greater adoption of ADUs a few years back. And since that work is concluded, it's been interesting that the demand has not been met, even though that there were changes there. I would continue to look at other housing alternatives based on lot sizes. Another important element for top consideration is to not overwhelm our city with congestion of cars and parking and utilities and ultimately come up with unintended consequences. Not speaking for the commission, the Planning Commission that I've been on, this is Ashton Alvarez's comments here, but my personal thought is I would approach this with meeting the state requirements around middle housing in a way that we are absolutely compliant, but not overzealous in what we allow the city to do with building. Rather, I think we address this in the immediate deadline that we have ahead of us, but then spend more time deeply understanding the areas that we could be more diverse and potentially expand. I would also lean heavily on the Planning Commission for this exercise and the detailed work that they've done because they have spent a lot of time with the consultants who this is all that they do.
Thank you. Moving on to question number 3.
Okay, it's all about the same sort of thing, but given what you know about the current city budget concerns, would you advocate to cut services or propose a property tax ballot to the community? If you advocate to reduce services, what services in the general fund would you start looking into?
It's a good question. Since we just talked about it, ADUs is a natural first step in the city council and you guys have already acted on it. It's a valuable lever that I think has meaningful work. And so that's one area that we can investigate further. One of the things about the ADUs that I had just mentioned is that we haven't seen a lot of people that have done that. So then that begs the question, why? And I think we need to dig in deeper on that and see if that's still a viable lever to see if there's any new data or input to help shape this element. So with my time serving as the immediate past chair on the Planning Commission, we spent considerable hours discussing this exact topic that you're bringing up with fellow commissioners and then the hired consultants. After deep deliberation and community feedback, some of the most prevailing takeaways that satisfied a majority was, to answer your question, to incentivize affordable housing development. Utilizing zoning changes, tax incentives, or other subsidies to encourage and development affordable housing in existing spaces. As a resident who successfully, oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
You're good.
Yeah. Let me go back to what you had said about the budget concerns, advocate, cut services, or tax ballots. How about we do that one? Okay, refresh. So this past week, to answer your very specific question that you just asked, this past week, I had an opportunity to connect with 6 different LFP houses, and that was actually at a kid's birthday party. And I had a chance to pose the exact question that you had asked, and the unfiltered feedback to the response was really enlightening. First, to this group, I do want to extend the appreciation that I have on the video and the write-up that you did recently explaining the budget concerns. I think that was done and executed very well. In fact, a few of the families had recited one of the leading lines in the video is that for every dollar, LFP is only seen less than 8 cents. I think as council members, that is exactly what you want, is you want informed residents. This is where I would focus most of my efforts on direct education and taking time to reach a diverse residents. So not only does my immediate family live in Lake Forest Park, but I have a large extended family that also resides in LFP, grandparents, aunts, uncles, all of which prefer different methods of receiving information. So you pair that with our rapid growth in the young family demographic, and as a council, really have to lean in to reach each of these residents in a very meaningful way. I can be a conduit to do that. So we've all seen a recent LFP tax proposition that recently failed. I think we need to spend time breaking down the why on that. The parents that I engaged with this past week at the party would ask that exact question. And the answer was they recalled voting no, but not for any deep reason other than it was just another tax. And I don't think we're in a position right now where we can propose a tax that we don't think is going to pass. So to answer your question, council member, the council has deeply reviewed and refined and produced a very solid budget. I have had the privilege of hearing from the late Deputy Mayor Bodie, who served as a liaison on the Planning Commission, that you all rigorously worked through the budget. I'm not in a place where I can firmly state exactly what needs to be cut or that I can 100% truly get behind a tax. Rather, I would advocate for continuing with information gathering that this council is well in the process of right now. I would be a strong advocate to engage residents who have historically not been deeply involved or educated on the specific items. From there, working collectively and publicly for continued involvement, would draft a plan that highlights what exact services are going to be potentially cut and if the revenue there is not captured for it. So from there, of course, we spend considerable time on a strategic plan that aims future revenue generation. So our residents are comforted in the fact that this council is working towards sustainable fiscal growth for the long-term future.
Thank you. Question number 4.
Thank you. So given the short duration of this appointment term, what of your big ideas do you feel that you can move forward with within this timeframe?
In a 6-month window, can't solve an entire budget problem, obviously. One can be integral in the process of laying the groundwork for an informed, inclusive, and transparent decision-making process. The biggest impact that I would commit to in the next 6 months is driving the community engagement element. This council, again, has done a great job of public hearings, surveys, specific events, and I would like to continue in that momentum, but expand it in more broad and diverse areas. To dig in a little bit deeper on that, I would focus on families who do not have the ability to go to evening events. I would partner with the local PTA who can support a council member on site during office hours or at many of their events that they have. I would heavily lean on the city volunteer boards. Parks and Rec Board have a table at the park during the play hours when neighbors are out. Inquire with what feels like we have 1 million pickleball players that are there from dusk till dawn, hang out during their water breaks. I know this because I live next door to them. So there's a lot of community members there. Utilize a farmer's market, post a stand or kiosk where residents and patrons can provide their input while also picking up their local favorites. In a 6-month time frame, I can confidently say that I would be a voice of underrepresented group in LFP. I will actively engage our neighbors as I always have, which is in person via local moms and buy nothing groups, Lake Forest Park School and parks. I could even get to work as early as this week because we have 4 kids' birthday parties.
Okay, thank you. Question number 5.
Yes, can you describe a time that you had a disagreement with people but were able to reach a consensus or a compromise?
Yes. So it's a good question. In understanding how a candidate can work in an environment where ideas are challenged, it's a very critical question to ask. So thank you for that. I think the answer to this question and what my experience has historically revealed is that in any instance, you have to be able to find common ground. That is paramount, number one. In the industry that I'm in professionally, difficult news, budget constraints, potential for lost jobs, services, benefits, it's unfortunately not out of the norm for me. In fact, that is why the firm that I work at exists. We partner with large employers, nonprofit, for-profit, municipalities, unions, and counties. And we work with the executive level to find a way forward in a challenging environment that is truly rooted in the value of the company while also combating unprecedented employee benefit hikes, namely healthcare insurance and employee benefit costs. One instance in particular that sticks out for me about a time to answer your question was was a handful of years back with a client when politically this client needed a really good headline for a short-term duration. From my perspective, the actions taken were such a departure from what the client had established as their long-term goals, and so they were completely in conflict with one another. We were really, truly on polar opposite sides, and the client in the end moved forward with a splash headline and gave me permission to just try and fill in the gaps where I could on the back end for long-term sustainability. As a consultant, I take final direction from clients, and sometimes they pay us for advice that they don't take. In the end, we were able to find a slight compromise. One side compromised much more than the other, but really this isn't an example of just a great triumph where, you know, the skies parted and it was beautiful and it was a perfect moment. It wasn't. What this is an example of is a really big impact on my career and also as a young adult. And at the time, it was more so the importance of not overly compromising to maintain a status quo and to maintain comfort level. And so that is a lesson that I took that I will carry forward with this council, and it's a lived experience and perspective that I would love to bring.
Thank you.
Question number 6.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. McCartney. Identify the top 2 policy issues facing Lake Forest Park and briefly state how you would approach them. I know there's a lot of overlap here. I understand that.
Sure. So the budget deficit, middle housing needs, how I would approach it too is again, we talked about revenue generation, a big highlight under that, finding new opportunities through commercial zoning, and then maybe through commercial zoning and then new revenue generation from businesses. The other one, middle housing needs, would be complying with the state requirements that we have, but then also really leaning heavily on the Planning Commission past the date to figure out how can we surgically get in there and figure out, are there specific levers that we as a city can pull that is going to strategically grow us to generate some more revenue, but also to make the kind of housing needs that our residents have asked for and how to do it responsibly.
Thank you.
Colleagues, which end of the dais would you like to start, or
So we keep picking on.
I think the three of us haven't
I'm
started.
willing to go first.
you want to go first? Oh,
Okay, well, I think the three of us haven't gone first. Questions.
oh, I go first?
You did. Oh, good. You were the last one to go first. Okay.
You guys want to thumb wrestle for it?
How about you? Shall we start with our director?
Sure.
Remembers this.
Follow-up questions.
Yeah, so I'd like to follow up on middle housing a bit. So you had mentioned going beyond the minimum in terms of recommendations from the Planning Commission about some other possibilities. I was hoping you could elaborate on that a bit. Are there particular styles of middle housing or specific locations in the community that you think would be particularly attractive for going beyond the requirements?
Yeah, good question. So part of the answer that I didn't finish earlier because I was on the wrong question, was looking at diversity and how to do that. Just a stat recently. So in 2020, Lake Forest Park had 21 homes that were built for resale. Of the 21 homes that were sold, the average square foot was 3,600 square feet and the average cost was 1.6 million. That is not speaking to what our community has asked for. And I think the hurdle that we have there is middle housing in terms of we can achieve more housing that the residents want is if we can help with permits, finding different alternatives. You had asked what kind of size, I think, ADUs, like we had talked about, that was something that we already have in place. So that is one lever. Also duplexes, triplexes. But I go back to my earlier comment about not overburdening the city. I don't think that that is responsible to have cast a wide net to say, hey, anyone can build if you want to. So to do it very fiscally responsibly is very important. Also talking about incentivizing, so using the zoning changes, tax incentives is one other area. And then as a resident myself, I do own buildable land in Lake Forest Park. And I have looked down that path before and I've assessed the costs of building housing. And the only way that it ever makes sense from a financial perspective is to get the most square footage as possible. And I think as a council, we could figure out and talk to builders, where are you seeing the hiccups that are preventing you from building the types of houses that our residents want? I can tell you from my perspective, the more utilities that you have to put in a house, which if you have duplexes, you need more sinks, you need more toilets, you need more elements. That is a lot more costs. And builders are simply just not going to want to do that. Then you look at little time investors like myself, I absolutely could not do that. And so again, right now, the way that people are able to make this financially work is to have big houses. And so I think as a council, we need to look at opportunities and different ways to incentivize the types of housing that we want to truly get at our middle housing issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. So would you like to go next? Councilmember Riddle.
Sure. I thought we were going to go the other way. Okay. So you mentioned, yeah, it's fine. I spoke up earlier. I deserve it. You spoke up about how to bring in kind of the family and get kind of feedback from them. I know that as a mom of a kid, it's hard to contact and get in connection with them. Do you have any sort of suggestions that you would start in order to do like the education process of, let's say, the levy or middle housing that you could help us understand?
Yeah, again, I think the video that you did, that was the first that I've been a resident for 35 years. That is the first video that I actually recall and that I can restate what was said to me. So that was done in such a tasteful way and it was very impactful. I think really leaning into that and emphasizing in that area with parents and of young kids, social media is going to be the best way. And then also going to the places where we know that they are at. The farmer's market, people are always there. The PTA events, people are always there. As you guys saw, because my children were nicely exited out, is coming to a council meeting is so difficult at the prime of a mealtime. We ran into that with the planning commission too, where we tried to host some open events and we had expanded hours from 4 to 7:30, I think. But again, that's prime. You're straight out of school. You got to get ready for dinner and then you got to go to bed. So I think that there's challenges where we can try to overcome them from a technology-based area like you guys have already done. I would really lean into that more, but also partner up with PTAs and other local events where we know that those people are going to be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Levo.
Thank you. There's a lot of emphasis on budget. So over several biennium, we've been fortunate to increase our unallocated funds. Would you use those funds to soften the impact to our tax rate payers?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I know that the city has worked really hard to build up that amount. And I don't think tapping into it is going to be a long-term answer. So I guess said differently, yes, a tax is probably something that we're having to face if we can't find budget cuts in a way. But no, I don't think tapping into that. That is our emergency fund. That is our general fund. It is something that has taken a long time to really build up. And I don't think using it is impactful. The other thing I would say though is our city has very much said what they care about the most, and that is safety. And so I would not compromise in those certain areas as well. So it's the balloon effect. When we're squeezing one way, someone else is going to have to go. And I just don't think using our funds that we've generated and saved is going to be a long-term solution.
Councilmember Good.
Is there any other issue facing Lake Forest Park that has not been addressed here that you'd like to mention?
If this council position was for a couple years, I would say, yes, let's talk about transit, let's talk about the park. But given the 6-month short term, I would love to say there's so many different things that we could get involved in. But I think where I could really find impact are the things that we've talked about today and what we are facing that is incredibly pressing. Not to downplay the other things that the city is facing. We have a lot of different things going on, all of which are very important. But as this group knows very well, we have to prioritize given the timeline that we have. So I'm aware of the other things that are going on, and I know we've talked about them in great detail. But I think for the context of this meeting, absolutely the budget and housing is of greatest importance.
Thank you. Helen, would you like to, and Deputy Mayor Bertoni?
I actually had the same question as Council Member Riddle, and you answered it very well and very thoroughly. So
Thank you.
I'm trying desperately to find something to ask you, but that was my question and you already answered it. So
I could read you the wrong answer to a different question. You guys are making me nervous.
but thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you,
being here.
Councilmember Saunders. Deputy Mayor Bertoni.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my question to you is about the natural environment. Obviously, you've addressed it to some degree here. One of the concerns that many residents have is, how are we going to densify without basically harming our canopy and our natural environment? Do you have any ideas about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that has come up a lot in the Planning Commission, and it is obviously a very important topic given the city that we're in. What I can tell you is I don't have original ideas. What I have are the ideas of the people that I've worked with on the Planning Commission. And I think that's a really important point to call out because the Planning Commission has some very, very sharp people who this is their world. They do it professionally and they have served their time. They have committed to serve their time by being on the commission. And so I think in order to address those specific areas that again is not my forte, I very much appreciate our city. I love the green. I love the park. I've made that very apparent. But I would heavily lean on the people where this is their expertise. And that's what I would offer.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you so much, Ms. McCartney. And we'll be moving on to our next candidate. Thank you again.
Much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, please. Welcome. Oh, you have 5 minutes for your introduction. Sure. And I really think we need to put a motorized wheels on it like Saturday Night Live. That would be better, folks.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Deputy Mayor. Good evening, City Council. Thank you for this opportunity to showcase my candidacy for this position. My name is Fiaz Mir, and for the past 8 years, Lake Forest Park has been my home. It's been where my family has grown. where my values have deepened, and where I've found inspiration in both nature and community. My wife and I are raising 2 kids who attend Lake Forest Park Elementary, along with Ashton's kids. And together we enjoy playing in our beautiful parks, Horizon View Park, also with Ashton kids, and shop at Town Center, and yes, find every opportunity to squeeze in a game of pickleball, much to the chagrin of some residents. A little bit about me. I immigrated from India 24 years ago. I've lived in Texas, Nevada, California before moving to Washington State 8 years ago. And I can't overstate this, how much it's meant to me that this community has been so welcoming and accepting. And this sense of inclusion is exactly why I want to step forward and give back in a more meaningful way through public service. I have over 20 years of professional work experience. In the first 12 years of my life, professional life, I worked as a city planner. I worked for the city of North Las Vegas and also San Bernardino Council of Governments in California, where I've advised this city, worked with the planning department and public works department to build a better and safe transportation network for the agency. I also worked as a consultant and advised City of Los Angeles, LA Metro, and State of California on matters related to zoning, land use, transportation, and infrastructure policy, as well as assisting the government agencies with bid preparations and evaluations, which are also very critical in selecting the right contractor. I hold a bachelor's degree in architecture, master's in city and regional planning from the University of Texas at Arlington. I also have an MBA from UCLA, which complements my planning and architecture background with more fiscal stewardship and responsibility. Since moving to the LFP area 8 years ago, I transitioned my profession into technology sector, where I work with Amazon, and currently I'm a tech professional at a financial technology company in downtown Seattle. Regardless of be it in technology or in public service, the common thread throughout my career has been leadership that's rooted in service, building systems that improve lives. When we moved to Washington 8 years ago, it was a no-brainer. We found a great house in Lake Forest Park, and one of the things that attracted me about this house was the community felt like a city planner's dream, with natural assets, lakefront access, strategic arterials, SR 522 and 104, connection to the city, connection to other cities, was all impressive. And the other thing that drew me to LFP was its rich architectural tradition, including the beautiful mid-century homes designed by John Burroughs, homes that reflected deep respect for the surrounding landscape and the character of our neighborhoods. As someone trained in architecture and city planning, I truly appreciate the blend of built form and natural beauty. But what makes a city truly special? It's the community. I see it every day. In the parents I meet at school drop-off, the neighborhoods walking their dogs, the local businesses that know our names. My family and I are proud regulars at Third Place Books, Gyro Boss, Chocolate Man, Local 104, and the new ice cream place, Always Summer. These aren't just places. They're part of our fabric of our lives, and I want to see them thrive like others. As a council member, if given an opportunity, I would focus on these 5 priorities, which also align with the city council. Number 1, support small infrastructure development while protecting the character of neighborhoods. There's projects like the BRT, Lakefront Park. I want to get into this with my technical acumen. Promote affordability for both young families and senior, something like middle housing. Back local businesses and entrepreneurs who are the heartbeat of our city. Look at license and permits. Prioritize public safety and community well-being. Lots of cap improvement projects are based on that, and ensure fiscal responsibility with transparency and care. So in summary, with a foundation in architecture, deep expertise in city planning, and a modern tech-forward perspective, I think I can offer a well-rounded and future-ready lens to help shape the next chapter of Lake Forest Park. I'm here to listen. I'm here to lead with humility and to help preserve what we love while planning wisely for what's ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Lake Forest Park is currently experiencing fiscal challenges with general funds expenditures exceeding revenues. In the 2025-2026 biennium, the city council utilized approximately $800,000 from its nearly $7.3 million in unallocated fund balance, excluding reserves designated for emergencies. While the city has taken steps to reduce expenses, it has worked to preserve essential public services. Looking ahead, a projected budget shortfall of approximately $1.6 million is anticipated for the 2027-2028 biennium. How would you propose addressing this projected imbalance? And please be specific in your approach.
All right, thank you, Council Member. First, I want to commend the city and council for the proactive steps already taken to reduce the expenses while maintaining essential services. The projected shortfall of 1.6 million is significant, but not insurmountable. And I believe it can be addressed through a combination of disciplined financial management, smart growth, and targeted revenue strategies. In my role as an infrastructure consultant at KPMG, I had advised several regional agencies and state agencies on similar issues on how to balance the budget. And we used a two-pronged approach, looking at costs from one side, how we can control value and strengthen it, and on the revenue side, how we can enhance and build some new creative ways to kind of build funding. Let me talk about costs first. I looked at the budget, the 2025-26 biennium budget, and the biggest expenditures are, of course, 15 million in public safety, followed by 12.5 million in the general government, and then followed by utilities. We also have seen inflation increase by over 24% in the last 4 years. We have seen some critical services like 911 dispatch, jail, and insurance have driven up costs by hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I think that we can still examine further. What I would do is I would look into potentially some contracts and see if there's any chances of getting some renegotiations, especially for detention services and 911 dispatch. 911 dispatch, the numbers have gone down over the last 2-3 years, which again kind of speaks to the safety of the city. But I would like to look to see if there's any multi-jurisdictional opportunities or long-term pricing stability here. I know we work with Lake Chelan and King County for the dispatch services, but we wanted to see if there's anything else that we can do. I also want to operate operational offsets, such as exploring, city planning resources funded to the traffic safety fund, which is at about 8 million. And the last thing I want to do is asset management audits. This is something I've done in the past quite frequently with agencies. We basically look at underutilized city-owned land or right-of-ways that could be better leveraged or monetized. We could combine contracts to consolidate maintenance providers. I know there's a aging fleet that our police have, and also some not just the police vans, but we also have vans within the City Hall administration that we could probably combine the maintenance contracts for a better price. And I know there's already plans to move to EV in the future, but for short term, I think we can look at consolidation of maintenance contracts. Now, on the revenue side, we understand 1% property tax in 2025 is barely making a dent to the rising costs. What can we do? In the short term, I would look into licensing and permit fees, also looking into rezoning to get some new commercial. I did a quick study of benchmarking with other cities, Kenmore, Montlake Terrace, and I saw that our business license fees are quite lower than theirs. I'm not suggesting that we raise it. I'm suggesting we take a look at it, get the public in participation and involvement in understanding and making it a more transparent process. But these are the type of benchmarking analysis that I've done a lot in the past as a consultant in the city and working directly for the city, and I think I would recommend doing that. In a slightly longer term, I would pursue thoughtful new development through middle housing that aligns with the community character. But again, note that this is not something that will immediately fill the gap, but this will, each new home will add a new long-term taxpayer and allow us to be better, be competitive for state and federal grants. City of Bothell did that recently by being compliant with these laws. They were able to get some additional funding for sidewalk, park, and mobility funding. So if we don't participate, we fall behind. And lastly, it's a creative option, which I also have a lot of experience in, but I'm not recommending this, but I just do want to explore this opportunity as the public-private partnerships. I've done a lot of deals with states before, with O&M, operational maintenance contracts, consolidation, adopt a highway or park programs. So we have like Horizon View Park, Town Center. We could adopt a bench, sponsor a bench. We can adopt a trail at Leon's Creek. We could do billboard or telecom leasing in right away. Again, I mean, this is something that obviously will require full due diligence, community participation, and even seeing if this is something that's viable for us. But these are options I've done in the past. Solar infrastructure partnerships, naming rights. That's not for every city, but there are some cities that have done that. And then cities like Langley, Virginia, in Whidbey Island, they have done like cell phone facilities on poles and sidewalks. These are like smaller cell phone facilities that are added on the traffic lights that could bring some additional revenue to the city. I would also work on getting grant competitiveness, maybe leveraging staff or contracted expertise to kind of pursue these grants a little bit more aggressively. So that's another area that I'm going to look for. To summarize, whatever approach that I had spoken or mentioned requires a robust public communication. Residents need to understand the trade-offs. We must stretch every internal dollar and explore growth opportunities that make financial and community sense before considering asking residents for more. But we can't afford to fall behind by doing the bare minimum. So the key here is thoughtful planning, open communication, and discipline.
Deputy Mayor McCartney.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And second question is, I'll give you a second there. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, all right. Lake Forest Park is what they call built out.
Yeah.
Meaning there are not a lot of places to build new housing. What ideas do you have to increase the amount of affordable housing in Lake Forest Park?
Great question. Thank you, Council Member.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's true. We're built out, and we have been built out for probably a decade or two. Just to level set on everybody on a quick stats, 13.6K population, 5,500 dwelling units. The interesting thing that I found there recently was, which everyone's probably aware, is 82% of those housing units are single unit lots. There's not much room to expand, but that doesn't mean we're out of options. In fact, I've seen from my experience, some of the most effective strategies for increasing housing affordability come not from large new developments, but from thoughtful small scale solutions that fit the character of existing neighborhoods. Let's get into middle housing. I think that's been a popular topic from everybody, and which rightly so. So with the passage of HB 1110 and three other bills, we have a timely opportunity to update our zoning to support middle housing types such as duplexes, triplexes, and cottage clusters. We can look into updating the ordinance. I know the deadline is coming soon. I'm going to work closely with the Planning Commission and the Economic Development team to see what options we have. Maybe if there's any opportunity to increase the required 2 units per lot. For certain lots, depending upon their physical characteristics, there are culverts in our city, which we want to preserve. There's water trails in our city that we want to preserve. So depending upon an intersection of which lots we can do, I would love to look into that. We are blessed with larger lot sizes like RS20 zones and RS15 zones. So these do give us an opportunity to look into expanding a little bit there, but that's something that I definitely want to continue to work with the Planning Commission and everybody here on the council. The idea behind this is to give affordability and options for people. There's younger families who are looking to move from rent to buying a starter home. They probably want a smaller home and not necessarily in RS20 lot. So, but if we are able to add duplex or triplex or additional housing, that'll give them an opportunity to kind of get a starter home. On the other side, the senior citizens, they're looking to downsize. I mean, I have a personal experience there. When my parents moved to Seattle area, we couldn't find them a house or a living option in Lake Forest Park. So now they live in the city of Seattle. So we want to provide some options for our senior citizens. So they can live close to the family and the family can live close to them. ADU accessibility, which we have also touched upon previously, and the city has done a great job in passing the ordinance there. I would support efforts to streamline the permitting process and maybe get some pre-approved fabs, something like what City of Seattle has done, and also consider incentives like reduced fees or flexible height setback standards to make ADUs more financially feasible to attract homeowners and developers. There's also thoughtful infill and community input part, which basically look for some infill development. I'm not sure. I need to do a little bit more analysis and work with the Planning Commission to kind of see if this is a possibility, but anywhere near the town center that's near any key transit corridors, see if there's any options where we could do some infill housing. Also, I want to leverage regional partnerships and funding. For example, collaborate with King County or neighboring cities on affordable housing initiatives, applying for state and federal grants, exploring P3s. We should also look for options like incentive zoning or tax abatements, and see if there's any opportunity there. I know this is a lot. We're not trying to change everything at one go, but these are options that we want to at least consider in a thought. And from my experience in the past, I have done some of these in some capacities, and if this kind of opportunity arises, I would love to lend my technical expertise. So yeah, it's not about dramatic change. It's about slow, smart, and sensitive planning that reflects both our values and our future. So I will assist in making a community more inclusive while maintaining the unique character.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember, good.
Okay, Given what you know about the current city budget concerns, would you advocate to cut services or propose property tax ballot to the community? If you advocate to reduce services, what services in the general fund would you start looking into?
Thank you, council member. This is a tough one for someone who's looking this from the outside. It would require a lot more interactions and meeting with the city council and the city to kind of get to some straight recommendations. So, right, what I would say is I would give you guidelines on how I would approach this issue. I would first look at how we can reduce our expenses, or potentially, collaborate or consolidate some of the expenses. Look at maximizing transparency and community engagement in this process. One of the things I kind of do at my work is, bring stakeholder feedback or get community feedback, but also showcase the wins. I think that's something that we can start doing. Like, for example, the passport service that city has. I incredibly love that service. I mean, both my kids have got passport service from the city because of that. But I didn't know if this was costing the city or actually helping the city. And after reading the documents, I realized there's $500,000 coming in approximately from the service. I didn't know that. I think showcasing wins like that will kind of get more community involvement and engagement, and we could probably use that support to get a lot more folks in the community engaged. And I can talk about different ways we can do that later on. I would do that. I would also do a comprehensive review of the general fund spending, go through line by line general fund expenditure, potentially looking at any consultant contracts that we could, consolidate or renegotiate. I know there's a lot of consultants that work here, Facet, Cascadia, et cetera. We don't know, some of the contracts may be eligible for state or regional funding. I would evaluate public safety spending thoroughly. It's very critical, public safety. So it's not something that I take lightly, but I would like to see if there's any opportunities there to consolidate some of the services like maintenance, and use any other 911 dispatch consolidation services. After doing all of this, then I'll probably look at a property tax ballot consideration with a lot of due diligence. We find that essential services can't be preserved. So internal only if we can't find this, I would do this only if we can't find the essential services that can't be preserved through internal efficiencies. Again, like to clearly communicate. If we go that direction, we'll have to clearly communicate with the community and engage the residents. Neighboring cities have done things like this. Levy-led lift with Montic Terrace has done it. Shoreline has done it. So it's something. If we do go down the path, I want to get some learnings from those processes. So yeah, that would be my response.
Thank you. Thank you. Question number 4, Councilmember Riddle.
Sorry, finishing my note. So given that there's the short duration of this appointment term, what big ideas do you feel like you can move forward with within that time frame?
Got it. Thank you. I understand this is an interim role, but I believe there's a real opportunity to make meaningful progress, especially by lending my expertise to some of the city's most timely initiatives. I would say I might have a shorter learning curve because of my experience working with the city. I want to use that and kind of roll my sleeves up and get into the main issues that are there in the next 6 months. The first one, obviously, it's the middle house policy, which is due later this month. I can contribute to immediately by helping the city finalize a policy response that aligns with both state requirements and community values. With my experience, including in zoning and land use work for large jurisdictions, I think I'm equipped to assist with even mapping needs. I am a GIS professional as well. If there's any needs with mapping, I can help community engagement, implementation strategies. I would love to kind of contribute. My goal would be to comply and ensure that we not only comply to HB 1110, but we do so in a way that supports affordability. The other part I want to talk about, which is also very near and dear to me, is the Sound Transit BRT project. And it's a longer project, and it's a once-in-a-generation project for a city like this, it'll shape our city's future. There are lots of pros and there are lots of cons, and there's a lot of different sides of the story here. But I've worked in several TOD, transit-oriented development projects, light rail projects in the past. I understand data like what the ridership volumes will have an effect, what what concerns there are against pedestrian access and safety. I can offer guidance on mitigation strategies. If there's any tree removal or emissions. I would aim to be a resource to the council and a bridge to the staff, consultants, and public, ensuring our city advocates strongly and thoughtfully for its best interests. And this is something I think I can add definitely some value. I also want to support transportation and climate priorities in the comp plan. I'd be focusing on accelerating progress around transportation and climate resilience. I've also worked in these areas before. Whether it's improving walkability, supporting EV infrastructure. I understand that we are slowly moving towards EV in the future, replacing our regular vehicles for the police with EV vehicles. I also want to align our long-term climate goals. I can help connect vision to action by offering practical policy-driven solutions. Lastly, with the financial stewardship, I would love to support staff on budgeting and fiscal efficiency, how we can leverage technology to streamline processes, improve transparency, and identify cost-saving opportunities. Things like building dashboards, making more visible for the community. These are areas I have some expertise on, and I would love to kind of lead a hand there. So in short, the timeline is brief, but I'm confident that my skills can help the city advance some critical goals and build momentum for the future.
Thank you. Councilmember Goldman.
Yes, can you describe a time that you had a disagreement with people, but were able to reach a consensus or a compromise?
Sure. Thanks, Councilmember. Yeah, I do have a few examples in my mind where I was struggling which one to kind of go. And I'm going to go with an example where I was a consultant for the LA Metro in the city of LA. And the project was a transit-oriented development project near the Purple Line extension along the Wilshire Boulevard in LA. I do want to caveat that the goals of the city and LA Metro were different than what we have here. But I just kind of wanted to kind of see what lessons I learned from that that I could transfer and bring it over here. The project aimed to introduce mid-rise mixed income housing and small scale retail near a new metro station as the Purple Line was getting expanded. Purple Line, if you don't know, goes from downtown LA all the way to to Santa Monica. And there was an extension of this project, and Mid-Wilshire Boulevard was where a new station was being built. However, residents in adjacent single-family neighborhoods were highly skeptical, very, very valid. They voiced concerns about traffic congestion, loss of neighborhood character, and potential of displacement. So my role in the team was, I was a planning lead, and my responsibility was to help guide the community engagement process, clarify project benefits, and explore design and policy alternatives that could respond to community concerns. So basically, the challenge was to go from facing opposition to making it more of a collaborative atmosphere. So what I did with the action was I worked with the city and Metro to reframe the engagement approach. And this is something I do at work even today. Is when building tech products, we want to meet where the customer is. So similarly for public policy, we want to meet where the community is. And so what we did was we organized a series of smaller targeted workshops held in neighborhoods directly impacted by the project. They were designed as listening sessions first, not presentations. We translated materials into multiple languages and partnered with community organizations like Mid-Wilshire Neighborhood Council and Public Matters to ensure broader participation, especially from underrepresented voices. So during these sessions, and it was not one, we had a series of sessions. The end result of the session was we presented detailed traffic and parking analysis to counter misinformation. This is critical because, a lot of times we get public with a different idea of what the project is. So it's very essential to kind of educate the public and separate the misinformation from the real information. And also get the feedback, because that's why we started off the listening sessions. Based on the feedback, we discuss alternatives to design adjustments like step backs, green buffers, pedestrian first pathways. We proposed inclusionary housing targets and anti-displacement measurements. We engaged local businesses and housing advocates to speak directly to benefit of walkable and transit-connected communities. So from the result of this conversations and series of meetings, we were able to revise our site plan. We reduced the building height along the sensitive neighborhood edges, preserved key corridors, and dedicated space to community serving retail and on-site affordable housing. I also noticed something. There was a shift that happened with these meetings. The tone of the community was slightly changed. It moved from more opposition to more like collaborative. And that was for me the big win in this, and the big lesson learned in this process. So as I reflect past this experience, I would say it reaffirmed to me that consensus isn't about compromise for the sake of it. It's about building trust through transparency, shared problem solving, and respect. These are values I held closely and would bring with me to service on the Lake Forest Park City Council, especially as we tackle complex issues like development, affordability, and infrastructure investments in our community.
Thank you. We're on to Councilmember Saunders.
Yeah. All right. So, identify the top 2 policy issues facing Lake Forest Park and briefly state how you would approach them.
Thank you, Councilmember. I know we have touched this a couple of times before, but I think housing affordability and middle housing is probably one of the big issues that I would want to talk about. Lake Forest Park, like many cities, faces a growing need for diverse and affordable housing options, not just for newcomers like me, but also for long-term residents who want to stay in this community as they age, as their housing needs change. My approach would be support thoughtfully located middle housing such as duplexes, triplexes, and ADUs, especially near transit services and amenities. I mean, we have some national advantages. We have a great school district. We have proximity to Seattle. We have large lots already served by sewer infrastructure. This gives us an opportunity to add housing variety without compromising neighborhood character. I would avoid framing this as density. Instead, I would focus on housing choice. I think this kind of adds a preferable remarketing efforts to the public as well. So people can downsize, stay near a family, or move into community at a different life stage. I mean, that, as I said earlier, it's personal to me. I couldn't get my parents close to me because they didn't have a choice. I'd work closely with the city staff and residents to identify where middle housing makes the most sense, applying design standards that align with the Lake Forest Park's values. I'd also prioritize affordability and sustainability by exploring incentives tied to stormwater improvements, green building, and state housing grants. I look forward to reviewing the Planning Commission's recommendations. I know the deadline is really fast approaching, and supporting a final ordinance that reflects thoughtful community input. The other thing I want to do is climate action and sustainable growth. I think that's another issue that Lake Forest Park has made great strides in sustainability, but we must continue to align growth with our climate goals. As we plan for future development, we should ensure it supports walkability, reduces vehicle reliance, and strengthens our resilience to environmental risks. Just in the last 8 years, we have seen different effects of climate change here. I mean, I've seen snowstorms, bomb cyclones. I never heard that word before until like 6 months ago. So we have to be ready and and be resilient to any such of these environmental issues. So my approach would be to champion projects that integrate green infrastructure. I would like to expand or build EV charging capacity, support safe multimodal transportation, and uphold high performance building standards. With my background in city and transportation planning, I think I can help prioritize initiatives that balance environmental stewardship with community livability. I looked at the capital improvement plan with a list of projects. I think with my experience in the past, I would be able to kind of prioritize and allocate and help the Planning Commission and the city in their allocation of when the project goes at what time. And these are the 2 things, but just want to add a little key third issue is long-term financial sustainability. I believe there's an opportunity to explore public-private partnerships, review vendor contracts in public safety, and better leverage tools like traffic safety fund. I would also support more transparent communication with residents about budget pressures, trade-offs, and especially as we face projected deficits in the upcoming biennium. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to council questions. We're running a little bit behind here in time frame. Deputy Mayor, why don't we start this way and we'll loop around.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and your answers were very thoughtful and very, very dense. So at this point, I don't think I have any questions. I'm trying to process some of your answers still. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Saunders.
I guess the only thing I would like to know, if you could elaborate more, would be on the topic of the climate action process. And if we, as you know, we have been trying to hire a climate action person to take this on to find different ways of to keep up with the climate change and whatnot. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate more on that and if you would have any ideas of how we could go about doing that.
Yep, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, the climate action plan, which is one of the critical aspects of the city, has the CMAP, which is the committee here. I would work closely with the team to kind of identify what projects they have lined up in terms of priority. Prioritization is something I do pretty much on a daily basis when I'm building like technical products, and I would do the same here. I know we have fiscal constraints, we have budget constraints, but we have to also, but it doesn't mean that we do nothing. We have to be more strategic in terms of prioritizing which projects go first. Because with any of the sustainability related projects, we need to, these are longer term projects, and we need to make sure that what we do now sets us up for success in the future. I talked about integrating like green infrastructure and maybe even moving to like e-bikes, expanding EV charging or building EV charging stations. Living in the last 8 years, I've seen a lot more electric vehicles on our streets. And I think that trend is probably going to continue growing. And so being ready for that would be something that I would look for. Solar panels is also another area where, is something that I would probably focus on, because the thing with solar panels it's also a revenue generating opportunity. So that's something that I would kind of work closely with the consultant. I believe that's Cascadia, and I would work closely with them to see what projects they have in mind and help along with the Planning Commission prioritize those projects.
Great. Great. Thank you.
Councilmember Good.
Same question would be, are there any other policy issues that were not brought up that you want to mention?
Sure. I think one of the things I probably may not have mentioned was in terms of, it kind of coincides with middle housing. Some other policies such as how much the setback should be, how much the street frontage should be. I believe by ordinance it's about 75 feet. If we build like different units, there's a certain requirement. I think I would kind of look into that to see what is more sustainable, what will actually enhance building middle housing without kind of losing the fabric of what we had already proposed. So I would also look at like any reasonable use exemptions to see if there's anything where we need to make the policy changes that will kind of remove some of the residents who are burdened with some prior rules. This might be some quick, well, I say quick, but it'll go through the whole process of Planning Commission and understanding what the pros and cons for each would be before we make a decision.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So the city has been very fortunate over several biennium to grow its unallocated fund balance. And this is separate from our reserves.
Sure.
Would you use any of that to soften the blow to our taxpayers, or would you go out for a levy?
That's a great question. I mean, I've also looked at the debt service programs. But that said, the unallocated funding is something that the city has worked hard to kind of build as a reserve. And I would use it as one of the last reserves, the last options to kind of consider tapping into. There are several cost-cutting measures or cost consolidation measures that I would look into before I get into this unallocated funds. I mean, as I said earlier, this is something that the city and council have done a phenomenal job to kind of build this fund for the kind of a rainy day fund, and I wouldn't immediately look into tapping that. I would look at other opportunities to cost cut and also look at any revenue generation opportunities that I'd mentioned earlier in my presentation.
Thank you. Councilmember Riddle.
I can't find anything at the moment. I was trying to write down as much as I could. So no, I appreciate your thoroughness. I can't think of the question at this time.
Councilmember Goldman.
Okay.
Yes, a couple of times you mentioned walkability
Yeah.
and pedestrian infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, are there any particular things that you would like the city to work on to improve walkability and pedestrian mobility?
Yeah, it's a great question, council member. So I I love taking walks in the city. Both me and my family, my wife also loves taking walks in the city. I think as we are developing new traffic calming projects, the roundabout that's being built on, Ballinger and 40th Place, and other initiatives that we are kind of building, I think it's essential to kind of weave walkability as well into it. There's shared walkways, there's dedicated walkways. I think I'll look into providing dedicated walkways wherever they are. With the BRT project coming in, or at least being considered, that's another areas where, walkability is huge. That I want to make sure that we don't lose pedestrian access. But at the same time, we also look for options where we actually gain more pedestrian access. So I would look into different alternatives for those bus routes to see where it could potentially go, so we don't have to actually lose what we already have. Because walkability is something that I'm pretty passionate about. I think this is something that it promotes a healthy environment for residents. It literally adds minutes to your life. So this is something that I would consider very thoughtful consideration before eliminating any existing walkways. In fact, I would focus on building some new walkways into the complex.
I think we've covered that. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We appreciate your time and your thoughtful responses. With that, colleagues, we're going to move on to Mr. Saunders. Mr. Saunders, welcome. Again, whenever you are ready, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you.
That's next up. Greetings, council members and city staff. My name is Richard Saunders. Thank you for this opportunity. And having watched the applicants last night and tonight, I think it's so fortunate of Lake Forest Park to have good candidates who want to step up and help. I want to begin by acknowledging the significant challenges that and time constraints that the interim appointee would face. The city council faces several critical decisions over the next 6 months. These include achieving compliance with the state's middle housing requirements by the end of June, and completing updates to the comprehensive plan, including new climate elements mandated by the Growth Management Act. At the same time, the city is managing structural budget deficit, maintaining active coordination with Sound Transit on the SR 522 bus transit, rapid transit project, and overseeing normal municipal operations. Their interim position needs someone who can contribute immediately, navigate completely complex and navigate complexity with minimal ramp up, and support both short-term execution and long-term planning. I believe I have experience that helps with that. I served 11 years on the Planning Commission, including as chair and vice chair, working directly on municipal planning initiatives, ordinances, frameworks that are being used today. I participated in the Southern Gateway sub-area plan, Town Center Vision implementation, the 2015 comprehensive plan, and multiple ordinances, including the tree ordinance and the ADU DADU housing options. Professionally, I am a product director at Exponent Partners, managing product development and customer success teams for nonprofit technology solutions. My 35 years in technology, including 16 years at Microsoft, provide me with some background in strategic planning, stakeholder management, and complex project coordination that I believe translates well into municipal governance. I'm also deeply connected to the community. My family has been here for 60 years. I just welcomed my mom back from the hospital. She is living in Ashford Senior Living, 2 blocks from our house. I'm currently on the tree board. I have done extensive volunteer work with the Stewardship Foundation. My wife, Polly, for years has led the volunteer efforts at the 5 Acre Woods. My brother, Brian, has served on the Climate Action Committee and is a leader in Stream Keepers. And my sister-in-law, Ellen, is on the third member of the council. I am not seeking long-term council service, but I'm highly motivated to help during the crucial transitional period. I believe I can step in immediately and work collaboratively with the existing council and staff to tackle these urgent decisions and preserving what makes Lake Forest Park special.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Lake Forest Park is currently experiencing fiscal challenges with general fund expenditures exceeding revenues. In the 2025-2026 biennium, the city council utilized approximately 800,000 of its nearly 7.3 million in unallocated general funds. This excluded the reserves designated for emergencies. While the city has taken steps to reduce expenses, it has worked to preserve essential public services. Looking ahead, a projected budget shortfall of approximately 1.6 million is anticipated for the next biennium 27-28. How would you propose addressing this projected imbalance? And please be specific in your approach.
Thank you. And I'm sure you're relieved that's the last time you have to read that.
I should have edited it shorter.
The 1.6 million projected deficit for 27-28 requires a strategic approach that builds on the 800,000 in solutions already implemented while addressing structural revenue constraints created by the 1% property tax cap. I think there's really limited understanding by the community of that of the 2001 Washington State initiative that restricts cities like Lake Forest Park to 1% property tax increases. This is down from 6% prior to that was routinely used by municipalities. This has created enormous challenges for the city budgets. It's somewhat equivalent to an employer saying they can only give you a 1% salary increase every year unless they get approval from the majority of the employees at the company. Lake Forest Park doesn't have a lot of commercial business space, so we don't get much from sales tax. Property tax is a big source of revenue. So first, pursue additional cost reductions and efficient measures. I think you have to start here building on the $455,000 in cuts that are already made. We need systemic review of operations. Are there technology solutions that reduce long-term operation costs? Can we restructure service delivery to be more efficient? We should explore shared services with neighboring cities for functions like IT, legal services, or equipment purchases. I know that things like IT services have worked, shared IT services have worked for entities like our local fire departments, for example. There's also a growing role of technology and automation through artificial intelligence to bring staff efficiencies, which could reduce costs while also enabling existing staff to do more. I think the traffic cameras are a great example of this. Not all AI is good, but I believe strongly that AI can significantly help staff be more efficient and better at something that they already know how to do. In this context, I'm not talking about reducing staff or removing services. I'm talking about reducing time spent on administrative tasks that could enable staff to work on higher value work. Second, optimize existing revenue streams. The city projects several $1 million in annual traffic camera revenue from both existing and new cameras, but currently allocates only $785,000 for related personnel costs. The city could explore legally permissible uses of additional camera revenue for essential services while maintaining the traffic safety mandate. I would also advocate exploring expanded use of traffic cameras. The data shows that they slow traffic, which leads to improved safety for LFP residents. With the construction projects planned for ST3 on 522 and upcoming projects on Highway 104, there will be more pressure on pressure from traffic on non-arterial streets that would benefit from traffic cameras to slow traffic and potentially generate revenue. The third, pursue grant opportunities and cost-sharing partnerships. I understand there are federal and state infrastructure grants that may be fully leveraged. We may not be fully leveraging that could offset city expenses. For example, federal grants for road improvements, stormwater management, or energy efficiency upgrades of city facilities. Fourth, consider strategic revenue enhancements only after exhausting the other options. Given the voters rejection rates of 65% in 2021 and 78% in 2010, any tax proposal must demonstrate we've maximized efficiencies and fiscal responsibility first. The key is balancing fiscal sustainability with essential services while respecting taxpayers' concerns and structural revenue limitations under state law.
Thank you. We're going to move on to question number 2. Excuse me, Deputy Mayor Furtani, is my voice here.
Thank you. So, second question is, Lake Forest Park is what they call built out, meaning there are not a lot of places to build new housing. What ideas do you have to increase the amount of affordable housing in Lake Forest Park?
Lake Forest Park is essentially built out, which means we need creative approaches that work within our existing footprint rather than large-scale new development. First, let me clarify about what affordable housing means in King County. As I understand it, it's housing that costs less than 30% of income for households earning up to 80% of the medium income. So for a single person, that's about $77,000 annual, who earns about $77,000 annually, is an example of someone who'd fit into that affordable housing. So we're not talking about, someone who has a lot of resources. In a built-out city like Lake Forest Park, affordable housing is really about lower-cost rental properties, apartments, condos, and smaller ADUs that could be enabled as part of our middle housing policy response. So first, maximize gentle density opportunities. As a third-tier city, my understanding is we're required to allow duplexes, Lake Forest Park, plus ADUs and DADUs, but we should optimize these for affordability. Consider allowing multiple ADUs per lot where feasible, reduce minimum unit sizes to enable natural affordable housing, streamline permitting to lower development costs and reduce parking requirements. We should also consider enabling smaller, more affordable unit types, such as tiny homes, cottage housing, micro units, efficiency apartments, and live workspaces. I believe flexible zoning can create housing opportunities without dramatically changing neighborhood character. Second, incentivize development in strategic locations. The city can incentivize development in town center, in the gateway and neighborhood commercial areas through density bonuses, reduced fees, or expedited permitting for projects that include affordable components. I also recognize that the city has looked at that in the past and it's been challenging to implement. Third, focus on naturally occurring affordable housing rather than relying on subsidized units. We can create conditions where market rate housing is naturally more affordable. Smaller units cost less to build, rent, and buy. Duplexes split land costs between two households. ADUs can provide income to homeowners while offering rental options. Fourth, leverage strategic partnerships. I understand, I've read that King County offers $27.4 million annual in housing finance programs. We could partner with nonprofits. The city could partner with nonprofits, developers, and the King County Housing Authority on projects that can access regional funding while meeting local needs. We can also facilitate, rather than fund, reducing fees, expediting permits, or providing technical assistance. I think it's important to recognize that Lake Forest Park retains implementation flexibility in meeting the middle housing requirements. It's my understanding that the city can restrict duplexes on certain lots, but only where they can support it by clear evidence, particularly around critical areas and infrastructure limitations. And this is important to preserve our environment and the city character. The city is working with the constraints the key is working with our constraints rather than against them. Built out doesn't mean no opportunity. It means being strategic about the opportunities we have, focusing on gentle density that fits our community character while creating real housing options for people at different income levels.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Good.
Given what you know about the current city budget concerns, would you advocate to cut services or propose a property tax ballot to the community? If you advocate to reduce services, what services in the general fund would you start looking into?
Given the structural nature of our budget challenge and the community's clear voting history, I would prioritize efficiency measures and cost reductions before considering a property tax ballot. The first step has to be systemic cost reduction. We've already implemented 455,000 in cuts, but there's more to do. We could start by examining administrative functions that could be streamlined through technology and shared services, things like IT, like I mentioned, legal services, equipment procurement, and that other cities are doing collaboratively. My technology background shows me how automation can reduce administrative overhead without cutting frontline services. For potential service reduction, I'd focus on non-essential functions first. That might include reducing the frequency of certain maintenance activities, consolidating some administrative roles, or scaling back discretionary programs rather than core public safety, infrastructure maintenance, or essential city operations. Any service reduction should be done strategically with community input to ensure that we're not eliminating something residents highly value. Regarding a property tax ballot, voters rejected the measures significantly in the past. Any ballot measure would need to demonstrate that we've exhausted efficiency measures first, provided clear value to taxpayers, and addressed the fundamental revenue cost imbalance created by the 1% cap. Some services reflect community values and priorities that need to be preserved and funded appropriately. I think a good example is our Lake Forest Park Police Department. My understanding is not many municipalities of the size of Lake Forest Park have their own police force, but Lake Forest Park has maintained one for as long as I can remember. This is an example of a service that the community has overwhelmingly expressed that they want to keep. Therefore, we need to be able to communicate and articulate the value that the residents get by the city maintaining this service, and show, if necessary, that in order to sustain the service, the city needs additional ways to pay for it. The reality is, I believe, we may ultimately need both approaches, maximizing efficiency and potentially asking voters for sustainable revenue. But the sequence matters. We need to prove fiscal responsibility and exhaust alternatives before asking taxpayers who are already dealing with inflation and cost pressures of their own.
Thank you. Councilmember Riddle.
You. So given the short duration of this appointment term, what big ideas do you feel that you can move forward with within that time frame?
Yeah, I think realistically, the council and the city have some big immediate issues that need to be solved in the next few months. So I'd focus on getting those fundamental things done right rather than launching entirely new initiatives. My goal would be to develop a response to the state middle housing mandate that achieves balance, one that works for Lake Forest Park citizens while actually achieving the goal of improving affordable housing options and contributing to addressing the regional housing crisis. The big idea then I would have is hoping that the policy that the council comes up would be a model. Lake Forest Park could demonstrate how a city can meet state mandates thoughtfully, creating naturally occurring affordable housing, retaining its natural environment and character through smart zoning flexibility rather than fighting the requirements or doing the bare minimum. This positions us as doing our part to contribute to the balanced growth management in the region.
Councilmember Goodwin.
Yes, can you describe a time that you had a disagreement with people but were able to reach a consensus or a compromise?
During my time on the Planning Commission, I encountered several situations where we had significant disagreements, but ultimately reached constructive collaboration, consensus through collaboration. Three stand out, developing the accessory dwelling unit policy, working on the town center redevelopment, and updating the comprehensive plan. In each, we had differing opinions on how much density to allow, how to balance affordability with neighborhood character, or how fast to move forward with change. For example, commissioners questioned whether the ADU policy might unintentionally drive up property values. With the town center, there was heated debate over building heights and parking, and the comprehensive plan process. We had philosophical differences about how aggressively to pursue growth targets. Despite the differences, we were consistently able to find common ground. What made that possible was a shared commitment to the city's long-term goals and a strong culture within the commission, and leaders that facilitated discussion. So I know this may not be exactly what was being asked, but a very impactful experience I remember. As a member of the Planning Commission, we received a request from the Carrie Lewis Foundation, a local nonprofit that owns a large property encumbered by environmental constraints. They hoped to develop cluster housing on the site to serve vulnerable populations. The Planning Commission proposed a narrowly tailored solution that would allow cottage-style housing on properties meeting specific criteria, namely size and critical area encumbrance. Our goal was to provide a path forward for this specific case without opening the door more broadly with unintended consequences. However, when the proposal reached the City Council, they expanded it into a general purpose cottage housing ordinance, applying it to a much more widely than the Planning Commission had intended it. At first, I supported the ordinance because I believe it increased housing options through gentle density. But as implementation began, serious issues emerged: community backlash, unforeseen development pressures, and a policy framework that was too simplistic to handle complexity. The ordinance was literally less than a page long. Rather than, or the policy, rather than standing up by my original support, I engaged in listening, talking with neighbors, city council members, and staff, and observing how projects were unfolding. I came to see that the ordinance, while well-intended, wasn't ready. I did come before the council and publicly advocate for repealing, as many others in the community did, emphasizing the need for more complete and forward-looking approach. The council ultimately repealed the ordinance. It wasn't a reversal of principle, but an acknowledgement that the better design and cheaper, a deeper community alignment were needed. So I think the learning that I had from that experience remind me that good policy isn't just about good intentions. It's about good design, timing, and community trust. And being able to change my position based on new evidence and stakeholder feedback was an important moment of learning for me.
Councilmember Saunders.
Okay. Identify the top two policy issues facing Lake Forest Park and briefly state how you would approach them.
Thanks. I believe the two most pressing policy issues facing Lake Forest Park are fiscal sustainability and implementing state housing mandates while preserving community character. First, long-term fiscal sustainability. The structural challenge isn't just the 1.6 projected deficit. It's that we're constrained by the 1% property cap while facing double-digit inflation costs increases over 4 years. My thinking is optimize existing revenue streams like traffic cameras, pursue regional partnerships and shared services, implement technology-driven efficiencies, and only then consider voter-approved revenue measures. The city needs to demonstrate fiscal responsibility before asking taxpayers for more. Second, implementing state housing mandates while preserving community character. We have the June deadline for middle housing just 25 days away. My planning commission experience taught me that good policy requires good design, timing, community trust. I'd focus on gentle density, optimizing duplexes and ADUs, considering flexible design standards, reduced setbacks, or considering reduced setbacks and streamlined permitting rather than pushing beyond state requirements. The key is meeting our legal obligations while respecting community values and ensuring implementation supports naturally occurring affordable housing. The question asked for top two things, but additional pressing policy issues are imminent related to climate, and that there's a climate element that's being proposed for the comprehensive plan and the climate action plan. And then also transportation and sound transit coordination presents ongoing community relations and implementation challenges around the BRT project. This could require new policies by the council. My role, I would see my role as, working with the council to, really dig into those issues and try to figure out what is the best, consensus for the city.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. Follow-up questions. Let's start with Councilmember Goldman to go this direction, loop back around.
Sure. So you shared your experiences with the city's prior cottage housing ordinance. Once the city passes middle housing bill by the June deadline, is cottage housing something that you'd like to see the city take up in the future in a thoughtful way?
I think the city should consider lots of different types of housing, yes. I don't know specifically that cottage housing is one that we should do after, the adoption. But I think, as I stated in my previous answers, I think there are so many different types of housing, whether that's, tiny housing or reducing the size of ADUs, work-life housing. I think that the city would be well served by really looking creatively at lots of different types of housing, and cottage housing is one of them.
Thank you.
Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. I'm trying to think if I have any questions for you. I think you did the one that I was interested in. So I think I'm good.
Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you. It's interesting you mentioned the Carrie Lewis cottage housing proposal. Yes, we were both on the planning
both
committee
are, yeah.
at the same time. And yes, it was proposed as a pilot program. Over several biennia, the city's been fortunate to build up its unallocated reserve. This is above and beyond our reserve for rainy days. Would you at all use any of that unallocated fund balance in our general funds to soften the blow to our taxpayers?
My understanding of the unallocated fund is that it's really used once you have a budget in place and you're going through that for biennium, that you use that to balance the ship or right the ship. And it's not should not be used as part of your budget.
Thank you.
Councilmember Good.
You answered my question, included with number 6. So,
Oh, the additional.
yes, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Saunders.
I'm actually good. I don't have any questions for you.
Deputy Mayor Furtani.
Sure. Thank you very much for your thoughtful answers, Mr. Saunders. And I have one question, which is when you were talking about maximizing gentle density in the city, you wanted to optimize for affordability, streamline permits, and so forth. I'm wondering, can you go into a little bit more of what the goal of those would be? What do you mean by gentle density, for instance, and how did these policies you propose achieve that?
Yeah, so gentle density, which is not a term I came up with, but it actually was introduced by John and Jack and others in the community during the ADU DADU ordinance process. So by gentle density, you're looking for ways to kind of fit in with the existing infrastructure. So as opposed to, for example, adding significant density in a large area, like if we were to, in town center, build, 700, 800 units, that would be significant. Even probably 250 units as is currently allowed, I think would be significant. But that is, I don't think that would be considered gentle. That would be, it could be successful, but it's not gentle. So gentle is working within the existing infrastructure and having minimal impact on the character of the neighborhoods. So by adding smaller buildings like dadoos or even tiny houses, you're able to use the infrastructure, have limited environmental impact. So the things like your tree ordinance, your critical area ordinances, those still apply. And so that's what's meant by gentle.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this concludes this part of our process. Thank you very much, Mr. Saunders. We appreciate it. Before we move on to public comments, I would just like to say how heartwarming it is for all of us to see such outstanding candidates being willing to volunteer their precious time to serve their community. We've had every candidate that we've interviewed could certainly serve on the council. And we sincerely, to a person up here, hope that you will, regardless of the choice that the council ultimately makes, will stay engaged with this community and with this council. And if you have questions, sometimes these interviews raise questions that you might want to follow up. Please do follow up with us or with staff. We'd be happy to engage you in a conversation about helping you understand better some of the nuances of or specifics about what are actually is going on within the community and the city. So we thank you very much. With that, we're going to move on to public comments. The council, thank you very much, Mr. McLean. The council will not be accepting online public comments. This portion of the agenda is set aside for the public to address the council on agenda items. However, the mayor or council may not respond to comments from the public. If the comments are of a nature that the council does not have influence or control over, then the mayor or presiding officer may request a speaker to suspend their comments. The council may direct staff to follow up on items brought up by the public. As this is a special meeting, we had a very limited scope, so that's where we are. With that, we'll open public comments. Mr. Feeney, please join us at the podium. Welcome, Don.
Good evening. You have a rare and an unusual challenge / opportunity tonight. That is to select a council person for the next 6 months with lots of work in progress that needs to be finished. We all know it takes, at best, a couple months to become functionable as a new council member. You have had 6 great applicants for this position, and we are fortunate because of that. Lake Forest Park has had several 25 years of major community events that have helped to describe the nature and why we're such a unique community. Richard Saunders has had a history and an understanding of serving and supporting this city. Richard has been an active member of the 2003-2004 Sustaining the Livability of Lake Forest Park, the Future of Our Town Center, the 2005 Town Center Framework Design Guidelines, the 2008 Legacy 100-Year Vision Project, the 2010 Community Forest Management Plan, and he has served for several years on the Planning Commission, including several comp plan updates. Many of those projects, I was fortunate to also be on those committees or on the council. And I always found his work just right on target. Clearly, Richard has committed to and has the knowledge of our community, and he will quickly, no, instantly become a contributing member of this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate your comments. Is there anyone else in the council chambers that would like to make public comment? All right, with that, we will close public comment. So from here, we're going to be moving on, as indicated before, to an executive session only to discuss candidate qualifications per RCW 42.30.110 parens 1 excuse me. And we will probably I'm assuming we will remain here. We would ask members of the public to wait in the foyer if you're choosing to stay here. We'll be turning off the microphones and the recording devices as well. And we will be coming back, and there may possibly be action when we reconvene after the executive session. We are anticipating council 20 minutes again, as we did last night. Does that seem reasonable? Okay, thank you. We're adjourned to executive. Pardon me?
Probably recommend.
I'm sorry.
At least 40.
40.
You spent 10 minutes on each candidate. That's what.
Oh, is it that long? Okay. All right. We started with 20. It will be 40 minutes then, folks. If everyone's amenable to that. Otherwise, we can try to keep it reined in.
Can we try
Good
and
with
keep it
me.
at 30?
Everybody good with that? Okay, 40 minutes. We will be coming back at
27.
27. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Oh, there we go. I just apologies. Welcome back, everybody. We just came back from executive session. And we have, again, this is a special meeting. We only have one additional item on the agenda, and that is item 5B, possible selection of a candidate to temporarily fill the vacancy of position 2 on the city council. My understanding is that there are some questions about procedure. Let's start with procedural question, and then we'll talk about the voting question, plurality versus majority, and we'll leave that to Ms. Pratt. You want to start?
Okay, well.
Or do you want to go the other way?
All right, point of order. I'm wondering, when are we going to make comments about the actual picking of the candidates? Do we want to talk about qualifications now, or do we want to put that off until after all these procedural questions?
Council's purview, what's your pleasure, everyone? Do you want to
Like
talk
to-
qualifications first, or do you want to talk procedure?
I'd like to know procedural.
Okay.
Okay,
We'll go with
that
that.
seems
Works fine.
reasonable for a framework.
Good.
Actually, let me do this in reverse if you all don't mind. Ms. Pratt, could you describe what is necessary for a successful vote for a nominated candidate?
Candidate has to get 4 votes. Has to get the majority.
Sorry. Since there are 6 of you here tonight, a candidate has to receive 4 votes in order to be appointed.
Okay. Questions of Ms. Pratt? Larry, did you have any, or is that?
No, that was my only question about plurality versus majority.
I have to
Um,
get a majority.
If we are ready, I'd like to make a proposal for how we would run the nomination and election process.
Council?
Uh,
Yes, please.
So what I would propose is similar to when we do chair and vice chair elections, which is that we would open the floor for nominations and each council member could nominate up to one of the candidates. And then once nominations are complete, we could then go around and make our comments about which candidate we are supporting and why. And then we would move on to a vote. If only one candidate was nominated, they would win by default. If multiple candidates have been nominated, we would vote. If one of those gets 4, they are elected. Otherwise, I would propose that we would eliminate any candidate that got only 1 vote or 0 votes. And then move on and repeat the process, have additional speeches on the remaining candidates, vote on the remaining candidates. And then we would keep going until either someone gets a majority or there are only 2 candidates left. At which point, when there's only 2 candidates, they're either going to get 4 votes or it would be a 3-3 tie. The mayor does have tie-breaking authority in that instance.
Deputy Mayor Furtoni.
So I have a question for you then, Councilmember Goldman, or Vice Chair Goldman. What's the vote going to be like? Is it literally, it's not an up-down vote, so we would express a preference for a candidate, correct?
Yeah, and similar to our chair elections, that if our candidates are apple, banana, and cabbage, then just a show of hands, who votes for candidate apple? And then who votes for candidate banana? Who votes for candidate cabbage? And we just see how many votes each of those candidates got.
Councilman Riddle.
I was not prepared to think about this in this way, but I also feel that because we have such a diverse but qualified pool of candidates, would we consider something along the lines of ranked choice voting? Because while the way that Vice Chair Goldman speaks of it, it's great, but it's it's your second choice might be my first choice, and if we knock mine, you know what I mean, the ranked choice voting. So which I don't think maybe means we wouldn't do it tonight because we're not ready, but I don't know if that's a thing.
Would have to defer to Ms. Pratt on whether that would be legally acceptable because there are specific parameters.
I don't know what rank choice voting is. I can tell you this person has to get 4 votes that
Yeah.
they are voted as the candidate.
Do you want me to answer that question? Or, okay, as I understand it, ranked choice voting is you list 1, 2, and 3, your first, your second, and third. If first does not meet the threshold, then then you recalculate based off of like second. And there's a method, but basically you take people's preferences until you get to somebody who can meet the four votes.
Councilmember
I don't
Fisk.
think you should eliminate people from further voting because I don't think, I mean, are you saying you eliminate that top person because they didn't get 4 votes? They only got 3? That sounds very complicated.
Yeah. It is, as I say, maybe tonight wouldn't be the night that we'd be able to do that.
I think
I'm in support of Vice Chair Goldman's method because that is the easiest and it's the quickest way to eliminate any candidate that's not in our minds. So I'm in support of Vice Chair Goldman's method.
Councilmember Golden.
I would also point out my version is a bit of ranked choice voting light.
Yes.
In the sense that if a candidate only got 1 vote, they would be eliminated. And then presumably whoever had voted for that candidate would then vote for somebody else in the next round. And so in that sense, it's a little bit of ranked choice-esque.
Councilmember
simple.
Lebo, I want to make sure we touch base.
I'm fine with this. I understand that cabbage is going to get eliminated.
I should have said cherry.
You should have-
I just couldn't think of. a
Couldn't you
fruit that
use like
starts with
Cindy
C.
Fox or something else? I'm hungry. Okay.
You know, I love coleslaw and and cheese.
The
so-
vegetable has to get. out of
Okay,
the
I'm
fruit
just
section.
going around the horn here, Councilmember Saunders, are you okay with?
Consensus over
I'm,
yes.
I'm in support of Vice Chair Goldman's.
Okay,
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor.
So yeah, I'm also in favor of that. I think one of the things that it does is it makes it very clear what's
Yeah.
going on. With ranked choice voting, we would have to explain the entire process.
Yeah.
And-
Understood.
And as Councilmember Riddle said, it might not be tonight. And I think some people would like to make a decision tonight, given the urgency of our agenda.
If that's okay.
I withdraw my concern. I agree with Vice Chair Goldman, and ranked choice light in open iterations would be probably the best choice at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. What I would suggest now is, I know that there were some comments that people wanted to make about general qualifications. I think Councilmember Good had a comment. If anyone else does, Councilmember Riddle, I think, did. Other people that want to make general comments about qualifications. We'll start with Councilmember
Okay,
Good, and raise your hand after that if you would like to make a comment.
Everybody that has come before us has been very well qualified and is a definite beneficial member of our community. Our role with this temporary assignment is very specific. And the choice that we have to make while everybody is qualified, it has to best fit the need of what is facing us. So that's my thought on what I wanted to say.
Councilmember Lebo?
You know, because the applicants are so well qualified, it is a very difficult decision, and that's an enviable place to be, as difficult as it is.
Indeed.
Because it truly represents the values of Lake Forest Park that so many applicants want to apply for this temporary position and recognize the opportunity to serve on this council. So as difficult as it is, we are in a very enviable position.
Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you, Mayor. So 2 points that I'm using as I evaluate these candidates. One is middle housing is going to be brought to us and we have to approve something by the end of June, the month. So the qualifications around extending beyond state minimums is a great idea. I don't know if we're going to have time on this council in order to do that through this appointment period. There's just a lot of work we have to do in a lot of different areas. So in my opinion, I'm kind of weighting that a little bit lower, simply because I don't know if we're going to take advantage of that qualifications that all of these candidates have. I think the budget qualifications, I'm giving more weight to, because we do know that has to be done. But it's still also a very short period when we have to get a decision made on this council and to get it on the ballot. And so I think looking at those qualifications is who can spin up the fastest in the next month, in the next 2 months, for the next 2 months worth of work is, I think, really important. And that, so I'm weighting that a little bit more, and those that are interested in a lot more research, we just don't have time for a lot more research in order for us to get to the point where we're going to be able to make a decision on yes or no on the some type of levy. So that's just where I'm coming from. These are amazing qualified candidates. So I'm trying to find a way to weight them in a way that is going to be the most beneficial for the next 1, 2, and 6 months.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Vice Chair Goldman, would you like to chime in, or?
I will reserve any comments about specific candidates for when we get to the nomination process. I agree, it's a good problem to have, but there's a lot of very well qualified people, so it's not an easy decision, but it's a good challenge to be in.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize Councilmember Riddle's comment about the fact that we have such a short time frame. I'm looking at asking council on the 12th of this month to start basically giving me head nods on various aspects of the levy that we might be proposing. And so, I mean, that's a week. Okay, so it is really the case where we don't have a whole lot of time to play with and be able to actually say review the budget and look for cost-cutting measures. We've got to start making fairly serious decisions shortly. So want to ask council to consider that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Saunders, do you have any thoughts?
I just want to add that all 6 candidates are extremely qualified. It's going to be a hard decision to narrow it down to one, but it's an important one to make. And yeah, I'll just refrain from any more comments until we get to the process.
Well, thank you all.
Can-
Councilmember Riddle.
Can I follow? I said what I would be, I think I'll also be weighting in my mind those that emphasize communication, because I think that's going to be the big thing that's going to last beyond this next month worth of work, is how do we communicate what's going on with our community? So that's where my thinking is leaning towards, who's got the qualifications around best communication with the community.
I apologize, folks. Hang on just a second. A PD matter.
Oh, no.
Should Tracy step up?
Okay, it's okay.
Okay, okay.
Chief never texted me during meeting, but we're okay. I can tell you all later. Okay, so well, thank you, everybody. Let's I just would say from my standpoint, the candidates are outstanding. I don't envy your choice. I really do not, but it is, to Councilman Libro's point, it is an enviable choice. We have these people that are so well qualified, so deeply engaged in our community, wide different sets of skills, but they all share the passion for serving the community and volunteering in a way that is exceptional. Deputy Mayor Furtoni.
You touched upon a very important point. I think all of these candidates truly love Lake Forest Park. And I think that's a very important thing to remember, right? That's where the source of the passion and wanting to make things better comes from. So I don't see any of these candidates coming from a place other than love. And I think that's an important thing to acknowledge.
I absolutely. And just one last thought. In a time of in other cities where they're struggling to find candidates, or there's an incredible rancor and dissent and disagreement with very uncivil behavior, it is so refreshing to have residents and neighbors and friends who are willing to step up and serve, because that's not the case in many communities right now, unfortunately. So on a positive note, let's get on with the nominations and speaking to things.
As a point of order, I think we have to decide, do we want to go through our voting process tonight, or do we want to defer until the June 12th meeting?
That's a very good point.
I'm okay for tonight.
Colleagues?
I'm good with tonight.
I'm good with tonight.
Good, but tonight.
Good one tonight.
Okay, I think you have your answer there, Vice Chair Goldman. Okay, let's move on. So as I understand it, we'll be opening nominations, and
I'm at the end.
overachiever. He's jumping the gun here, but it's okay. But yes, so we'll go around and please, Councilmember Good.
I nominate Ashton McCartney.
Okay, Ashton McCartney has been nominated.
We need a second.
Not in this circumstance. Okay, yes, Councilmember Riddle.
I'd like to nominate Fiarmir. Or Fiazmir. I pronounced it wrong, but there we go.
Okay.
I'd like
Councilmember
to
Saunders.
nominate Richard Saunders.
Saunders. Richard. Councilmember Goldman.
I'd like to nominate Sebastian Quesada.
Okay. Are there any other nominations, colleagues? Let's give you a chance to ruminate on this for a second. Okay, hearing no additions, we'll close the nominations. We have Ashton, Mr. Muir, Mr. Saunders, and Mr. Quesada. Is that correct, colleagues?
I
Okay.
believe that's correct.
Um,
And if we could, Ms. McCartney, please.
yeah, I was just writing that down here because I was writing first names first. I apologize, Ashton. There we go. Okay. All right, and so we will start in order. Okay, all those in favor?
Oh, I thought we
Do
were.
I wanna-
We want to speak to?
Oh,
him?
I'm sorry, you'll speak to them first. Yes, okay, let's start in the order of nominations then. Why don't we start with Councilmember Good
What am I
to
supposed?
speak to
Ashton?
Ms. McCartney.
Okay, I nominate Ashton because of her community engagement and her understanding of where we already are within the budget. And that there's, she did bring up that that the budget, we've already gone through the budget. We've already done as many changes as we can with the budget. And that that what we need to focus on is our messaging for what's going to happen between now in the next 6 months. So messaging and community involvement, and also the fact that she is from Horizon View, which gives us a better representation for a part of our community that's not served.
Thank you, Councilmember. And Mr. Muir was nominated.
Be me.
Yes, please.
Thank you. I appreciate a council member. I'm already upgrading them. Lord Almighty, applicant, Mr. Mayor, for his ability to bring groups together that are in opposition, as his example was, specifically around, in that case, transit-oriented development, and his phrase of build trust through transparency. And I think that really resonates with our community. They always want more transparency into the process. He has some skills that can help us do that. He's got the communication and collaboration skills to work with the community to understand what we're doing. And he's really dove very deep into what we've done already. And I feel like he's ready to move right away into making decisions and then communicating those decisions to our community.
Thank you, Councilmember Riddle. Councilmember Saunders, would you like to speak to Mr. Saunders?
Yes, I would. So I nominated Richard Saunders because of his longevity in Lake Forest Park, his service on various committees, planning commission, volunteer work. His communication style and the ability to bring people together. And I think he would hit the ground running. He knows the city, he knows the issues we're dealing with. And I think he would be a great addition to the council in the interim.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Mhm.
Councilmember Goldman.
Yes,
Mr. Caseta.
I nominated Sebastian Caseta. I was very impressed by his passion when he spoke with us last night. I was impressed with his experience. He had built an ADU, and so not in Lake Forest Park, but he experienced challenges in terms of requirements, permitting. And so having that perspective for a property owner, what are the challenges, that impressed me. I like the approach that he took in terms of incremental buildup. The idea that, well, if it's a controversial idea, let's do a little bit at a time, encourage buy-in as people see how it's successful. I think that's a good strategy to have with policy. So he impressed me in those regards.
Okay. Thank you, colleagues. Are there any other comments from the sponsors about their candidates that they've nominated?
Sponsors or anybody?
It's the will of the body.
I suppose anybody.
Yeah.
Right. 'cause
I
you'll-
would love
yeah,
to hear
you'll
from
talk
those
to
that didn't nominate,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Deputy Mayor Furtone.
All right, so I have to be honest, I'm very torn. The fact is that all four people who are nominated just are amazing, including the two that we also didn't either, right? I mean, you got to make a choice at some point. And so it could have been the ridiculous extreme where we nominated all six people, each of us individually, and that could have been a possibility, okay? But the fact is that basically, yeah, right now, I mean, my front runners in my mind are Ms. McCartney and Mr. Saunders. And just because basically they have almost complementary skills. Ms. McCartney is clearly very involved in the community, very into the outreach, talking to underrepresented voices, and just has a lot of passion for a lot of projects that, of course, I'm interested in too, like for instance, middle housing and things like that. But at the same time, Mr. Saunders has a wealth of experience again with the community, but has a long history, has worked on a lot of projects that are in the city. Doesn't help that they were both the planning commission chair and vice chair, because that sort of cancels out, right? I shouldn't say it that way, but the fact is that
Equal qualifications.
equal qualifications, there we go, right? But the fact is that I'm still mulling over in my mind. They both bring such different skill sets to bear that it's hard for me to you'll find out apparently.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Lebo.
Councilmember Furutani expressed many of my thoughts. Again, we have such talented applicants, but for me, both Ms. McCartney and Mr. Saunders stood above. I've had the pleasure of working with both of them on the Planning Commission in different roles. They lead in very similar ways, and one is collaboration and listening. So I think either one of them would be excellent on this council. I appreciated their responses and experiences very much. I will give a little edge to Mr. Saunders with his thoughtful approach to our budget. The middle housing is definitely something that we're going to have to take up, and I think both of them could address that and be an asset to the council. But I would give an edge to Mr. Saunders for his budget ideas and thoughtfulness.
Thank you, Councilmember Lebo. Colleagues, other questions, other comments, excuse me. Councilmember Good.
I just want to remind everybody that the position is for a limited amount of time. And I think some of our thoughts are projecting into a longer time frame when it is actually very short. So we have to maximize the person that's chosen is who's the best well suited to fit that 6-month role. And that's why I nominated Ashton.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Good. Okay. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor.
And building on Councilmember Good's comment, I think some of the fault lies with us that, when we were proposing questions for the interviews, perhaps, at least I can say for myself, that I wasn't looking on that time frame, right? I asked a question about affordable housing, which of course, nothing is going to get done in the next 6 months. Okay, fine. Though the groundwork can be laid. So yeah, I think it's a fair point that you're making.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilmember Rowland.
I just want to reiterate and support Councilmember Good's sort of expression. I struggle to limit my selection by that narrow definition. I would appreciate if any of these folks were to come back in a later date in a different capacity. I would be so happy. And their passion for the community and their skill sets would be amazing for a long-term engagement with on the council. So again, I'm trying my best to what is going to help us move this community forward until they can make a decision in November.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Riddle. All right, any other comments going once? Okay. The moment you've all been waiting for. Let's just start from the top. All those in favor of appointing Ashton McCartney to the vacant council position, please. All right, let's just raise hands. It's simpler to do it that. Please raise your hand. I'm counting 2. Okay. All those in favor of Mr. Muir, please raise your hand. We have 1 here. All those in favor of Mr. Saunders, please raise your hand. 2. And Mr. Caseta, please raise your hand. 1. So the tally is Ms. McCartney is 2, Mr. Muir 1, Mr. Saunders 2, and Mr. Caseta 1. So we are now,
According to the scheme.
Yes, so that means that the candidates Mir and Quesada have been eliminated. And we can have another round of discussions for the remaining two candidates, McCartney and Saunders.
Okay, colleagues who would like to make the first comment on the two candidates, on either of the two candidates.
I will go, I guess, again,
Please, Councilor Good.
I remind my fellow council members that this is for a 6-month period of time and to make sure that that's what we're focusing on, because like Councilmember Riddle said, is that the thoughts are all of these people would be great to come back and run for a general counsel position or do something longer term. But our term here is very short and very specific, and it has very specific needs for communication and for outreach. And Ashton's done a very good job of involving groups that we don't normally include, which is PTAs and public groups. And these are the very groups that we have struggled to reach. And that's why I'm focused. I want to, just make sure that we keep things focused and not longer term than that.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Good. Colleagues, anybody else want to speak to the candidacy of and the qualifications of one of the nominees? Yes, Councilor Riddle.
In that same vein, I think between these two, I feel that Ms. McCartney does provide us access to a group in Lake Forest Park that we've struggled with, that is going to be very concerned about whatever we bring to them in the next couple months. They're usually younger households, and, they don't have a lot of disposable money at times. And so this is going to be something that we really have to hear from them, not just communicate to them. We have to hear from them. What are your concerns? What do you want to see? And I think that she's the candidate that I think will get us the best in touch with that group to be able to have that communication with them and give them the transparency that we want to always give.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Riddle. Colleagues, Councilor Goldman, you're looking thoughtful.
Oh, I guess I need to change my vote because my candidate was eliminated. They're both really good. I think they both have planning commission experience in terms of, if I were to try to compare them, I think Mr. Saunders has a longer overall tenure of experience between the planning commission and the tree board. I think Ms. McCartney as others have said, brings I think a newer communication style that will help us reach out to members of the community that have not historically been as engaged with the city council. They're both good. Yes, I like them both. I value both of those qualities. I suppose, especially if we are going to be considering a levy, communication is going to be very important. And being able to reach out to people to educate them about the budget. So I think being able to, that communication is probably my top priority.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Goldman. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm finished.
I wanted to let you think if you need to. Deputy Mayor Furtani.
Yeah, and much as basically I hate to make this one of the things that helps me decide, representation is important. And what I'm talking about here is geographical representation. As many of you know, Lake Forest Park grew as a series of Growth Management Act mandated additions. I think there's a total of like 127 of them or something like that.
57, I think.
57, okay, so
Yeah.
some huge number.
It's massive.
Yeah, and often when people talk about Lake Forest Park, it's almost like they're talking about town center, perhaps the surrounding few blocks. And much as I hate to say, we don't really have a whole lot of representation from Horizon View in the outlying areas in that area. And it would be great to have that voice on the council. So that's one of the things that's helping me decide.
Okay. Some of you may not know that City Hall was at Horizon View for a period of time.
Yeah.
Ms. Saunders, do you have any comments?
Well, I agree with everything that everybody is saying, and I think it's gonna be a really hard decision. I think they're both great and bring so many good qualities and experience. But the geographical representation is also important, and excuse me, reaching communities and neighborhoods that we normally would have a hard time reaching is very crucial in this short time. I agree with that.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Yeah.
Colleagues, are you ready to make the difficult decision? Some of you clearly have decided, some of you are conflicted. I can read it on your faces. So here's where the rubber meets the road, people. Okay. With that, we'll close off the comments, and all those in favor of Ms. McCartney to fill the interim vacancy position, please raise your hand. 3, 4, 5. Okay. And
No.
actually, there we have it.
But I think I was.
I'd like to complete the.
One more. I'm sorry. All those in favor of Mr. Saunders, please raise your hand. Okay. One for Mr. Saunders. Okay. Yes, thank you. And I guess that's where we are right now. Congratulations, Ms. McCartney. You have just joined this motley crew up here. So welcome. We will coordinate with you as soon as possible, the swearing in with the judge. Hopefully, we might have some availability very soon. So we know that you're anxious to hit the ground running. I know everyone here is anxious for you to get up to speed and get moving. We do thank all of the candidates that put themselves out there. It is not an easy thing to do. You know, and there's been some great articles about the vagaries of serving as an elected official in this country over the last 5 or 6 years. It is not an easy thing to do. And for somebody to be willing to volunteer their time and their expertise and their passions and their time away from their families is absolutely what this democracy is about, and it's exceptional. We are so fortunate that we have such talented and considerate and kind people in this community.
Yeah.
So we thank them all. Councilmember Riddle.
I'd like to thank my fellow council members for providing an environment where so many people want to join this council. It is really a testament to the work that we have been doing at keeping focused on the work, keeping focused on the community. So I appreciate us for being someplace people want to be, if you will. So let's keep up the good work.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all. Once again, congratulations, Ms. McCartney. Really appreciate it. And since we have no ability to talk about anything else, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Great conversation.